A suffocating silence settled over London as an unprecedented decree echoed from Buckingham Palace. Without warning, Queen Camilla was officially stripped of her royal titles, her public office, and every representative duty under the crown. Within seconds, a woman who once commanded the highest corridors of influence was cast into total isolation. This historic collapse erupted after Camilla crossed an unforgiving line, launching a sharp, bitter assault on Princess Catherine in front of King Charles III and horrified senior staff. To cross Catherine was to attack the very future of the monarchy itself. Under royal prerogative, a sovereign decree carries immediate constitutional weight, effectively severing an individual's official ties to the realm without requiring parliamentary debate. While the formal document bore the sovereign's wax seal, the true force behind this purge was Prince William. Methodical and unflinching, the heir collected every piece of evidence, presenting an airtight case that left the institution no choice but to act. Just before dawn, heavy footsteps echoed through Clarence House as armed protection officers moved in to seal her private files. A crimson-stamped envelope sat on the desk. No formal warnings. No right to appeal. The message was devastatingly clear. The future king will protect his family, no matter the cost to his father's heart. Left alone in the quiet shadows of a palace that no longer belonged to her, the weight of total banishment pressed down. Power had shifted, leaving only the bitter cold of complete erasure. Do you believe King Charles issuing this severe decree under William's pressure was a necessary move to protect Princess Catherine, or was it simply too harsh? Drop a number 1 in the comments if you support the decision, or a number 2 if you think the punishment went too far. 2. The heavy oak doors of the Grand Council chamber inside Buckingham Palace shut with a dull, absolute thud that echoed down the sweeping marble hallway outside. 2 armed royal protection officers stepped into position, locking their hands behind their backs and enforcing a strict security perimeter. Their orders were absolute: no one entered, no one left, and no communications crossed that threshold until the session officially concluded. Inside the room, the atmosphere felt unnaturally heavy, almost entirely drained of oxygen, as the pale morning light struggled to pierce through the thick, gold-embroidered velvet drapes. The towering portraits of past monarchs hung in stern silence along the paneled walls, watching over a gathering that was about to alter the course of modern royal history. Before any formal business could commence, white-gloved palace aides moved silently along the length of the polished mahogany table, holding velvet-lined magnetic boxes. Every smartphone, encrypted tablet, and digital recording device belonging to the senior advisors, constitutional experts, and high-ranking members of the Crown Council was collected and sealed away. The silence that settled over the room following the collection was not merely quiet, it was a suffocating wall of tension. In that forced stillness, the rapid, shallow breathing of seasoned courtiers became painfully audible. Men and women who had spent entire careers navigating the subtle, unspoken politics of the court now kept their eyes fixed firmly on their blotters, carefully avoiding the cold, unyielding gaze of Prince William. At the far end of the long table sat King Charles III. His hands rested completely motionless on the antique wood, his knuckles pale against his skin, his eyes staring blankly into the empty space between his crest-embossed stationery and his silver water goblet. The immense weight of centuries of institutional tradition seemed to rest squarely upon his slumping shoulders, accompanied by the crushing realization that his sovereign authority was being methodically maneuvered into a corner by his own heir. Every line on his face betrayed a deep, exhausting strain, the physical toll of a monarch trapped in an impossible conflict between his personal devotions and his royal duty. Without uttering a single word, Prince William reached into the leather briefcase, sitting beside his chair, and withdrew a thick, ribbon-bound dossier. He tossed it lightly onto the center of the table. The sharp slap of heavy paper hitting polished mahogany cracked through the room like a single gunshot, instantly shattering the fragile pretense of routine court procedure. Inside that folder lay an exhaustive, time-stamped record of every breach, every caustic insult aimed at Princess Catherine, and every physical escalation that had transpired during the gown fitting at Clarence House. A formal Crown Council submission of this nature operates under a strict, rarely invoked parliamentary protocol. Once an official evidence package concerning the integrity of the sovereign's household is laid before the senior ministers, the Assembly is constitutionally obligated to record a formal finding. Under this rule, the Council cannot adjourn or table the discussion. They must legally evaluate the material to determine if the royal dignity has been compromised. It is a procedural trap designed to prevent internal cover-ups, ensuring that once the formal machinery of the state is engaged, even the king cannot simply sweep the matter under the rug. Around the table, senior private secretaries and veteran legal counsel froze in place. Some lowered their heads even further, furiously scribbling meaningless notes on clean notepad pages just to avoid making eye contact with either the sovereign or the Prince of Wales. Their fingers trembled slightly as they held their pens, fully aware that they were witnessing a seismic shift in power. The evidence presented was not mere gossip or tabloid speculation. It was an airtight compilation of sworn statements, official security logs, and physical proof that laid bare a pattern of behavior impossible to defend. Across from his father, Prince William remained standing, his posture erect, his expression completely devoid of personal warmth or hesitation. His jaw was set, his shoulders squared, embodying the absolute authority of a future ruler who had decided that the time for compromise had passed. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The sheer weight of the documentation and the unyielding posture of the heir apparent communicated a single, devastating reality. The institutional machinery of the realm had already made its choice. For King Charles III, the moment was one of profound, agonizing isolation. Trapped between his deep personal loyalty to his wife and his sacred oath to protect the dignity of the crown, his silence spoke louder than any argument he could have raised. The room seemed to shrink around him as the realization set in that his authority had been neutralized not by an enemy outside the gates, but by the very system he commanded. The power had shifted irrevocably across the table, leaving a grieving father to face the uncompromising resolve of a future king. As the minutes dragged on, the cold reality settled into the bones of every official present. The silence was no longer just tense, it had become an unyielding verdict. The future of the house had asserted itself, and the old order had no remaining moves to play. 3. To understand the full gravity of the dossier laid before the council, one must look back to the fateful morning at Clarence House when the invisible line of royal decorum was shattered forever. It began in the grand drawing room during a private preview of the ceremonial regalia, an event designed to finalize the wardrobe for an upcoming state occasion. Designers, tailors, and senior household staff stood quietly along the perimeter, holding sketches and fabric swatches in practiced deference. The atmosphere shifted instantly when a media briefing report was brought into the room. Page after page of press coverage painted a single, undeniable picture. The public and global media were utterly captivated by Princess Catherine. Headlines praised her grace, her poise, and her effortless ability to embody the modern future of the crown. For Queen Camilla, who had spent decades struggling for public acceptance, the glowing reviews served as a searing reminder of her own tenuous hold on the public's affection. What began as a cold, sharp remark about protocol quickly spiraled into a bitter, uncontrolled tirade directed straight at Princess Catherine. Decades of accumulated resentment over popularity and royal hierarchy spilled out in front of the assembled staff. Catherine remained perfectly still, her face a mask of quiet dignity, refusing to engage in the hostile spectacle. but the sheer venom of the attack proved too much for King Charles III to ignore. Stepping between them, the king raised his hand, his voice firm as he attempted to shield his daughter-in-law and restore order to his household. That rare act of defiance from the king triggered an even darker explosion. Turning her fury entirely onto her husband, Camilla launched into a devastating personal assault. In front of seamstresses, private secretaries, and equerries, she called the sovereign weak, spineless, and pathetically subservient to his eldest son's family, declaring openly that he lacked the backbone required to wear the crown. Then came the moment that transformed a bitter marital dispute into an act of constitutional treason. Overcome by blind rage, Camilla reached out and violently ripped the gold and mother-of-pearl royal family order badge straight from the lapel of the king's jacket. The delicate silk ribbon tore, and with a harsh metallic strike, she hurled the priceless insignia onto the hard parquet floor, shattering its mother-of-pearl inlay into pieces. Under the unwritten doctrines of British constitutional law, specifically the statutes governing the desecration of sovereign insignia, any physical act of violence against the royal family order in the presence of household witnesses constitutes a direct offense against the majesty of the crown. The badge is not mere jewelry, it is a sacred symbol of sovereign authority and royal bloodline. To desecrate it before staff is legally classified as an act of usurpation and contempt for the sovereign's person, an infraction that automatically strips the offender of institutional protection and triggers immediate intervention by the Crown's legal officers. The room froze into utter terror. Staff members stared at the floor, paralyzed by the sheer enormity of what they had just witnessed. King Charles stood utterly broken, his chest bare where the emblem had hung seconds before, his face drained of all color as the reality of the public humiliation settled in. Standing in the shadow of the doorway throughout the entire ordeal was Princess Anne. With the calm, uncompromising discipline that has long defined her service to the monarchy, the Princess Royal stepped forward into the silence. She did not raise her voice, nor did she engage with Camilla. Stooping down, she carefully gathered the shattered pieces of gold and mother-of-pearl from the floor and placed them into a velvet cloth. Within hours, Princess Anne secured the physical evidence, drafted a sworn statement detailing the verbal and physical assault, and personally bypassed the normal palace channels. The package was delivered directly to Kensington Palace into the hands of Prince William. The red line had not just been crossed, it had been obliterated. The fractured badge now sat as the centerpiece of William's dossier, an undeniable testament to a crime against the crown that no king could forgive, and no future king would allow to go unpunished. 4. The private library at Highgrove House was a sanctuary built for quiet contemplation, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling oak bookshelves and the muffled stillness of the Gloucestershire countryside. On this afternoon, the warmth of the room was completely extinguished. Standing by the heavy double doors, Prince William issued a single, unyielding instruction to the private secretaries, equerries, and personal protection officers present. He instructed them to clear the floor and leave them alone. As the last reluctant aide stepped outside, William turned the brass key in the lock. The sharp click of the deadbolt echoed through the silent room like a trap closing shut. Across the room stood Queen Camilla, her posture defensive, her eyes flaring with a mixture of indignation and nervous apprehension. She had arrived expecting a quiet reprimand or a delicate family negotiation, the kind of quiet internal compromise that had protected royal figures for generations. Instead, she found herself isolated in a locked room with the heir to the throne, whose presence radiated an absolute icy coldness. Without offering her a seat, William walked over to the mahogany desk, pulled the comprehensive dossier from his coat, and laid it open. His voice, when he began to speak, was entirely devoid of emotion. It was completely free of anger, raised volume, or personal heat. It was the measured, devastating tone of a prosecutor reading an inescapable indictment. Word by word, he quoted the exact insults she had hurled at Princess Catherine during the gown fitting at Clarence House. He recited the precise, humiliating epithets she had spat at King Charles III in front of junior staff. He laid out the time-stamped logs, the sworn affidavits of witnesses, and the formal reports filed by royal protection officers who had refused to cover up the incident. As the list of violations grew, Camilla's composure fractured into furious defiance. She lashed out, her voice rising as she accused William of orchestrating a calculated ambush. She claimed he was using a minor domestic disagreement as an excuse to satisfy a lifelong personal vendetta, seeking revenge for the ghost of his mother, Princess Diana. She shouted that he was deliberately manufacturing a crisis to purge her influence from his father's reign, desperate to control a crown that was not yet his. Throughout her tirade, William remained completely motionless. His eyes never left hers, his facial expression unreadable, his heart rate unchanged. He did not defend his mother's memory. He did not engage with her emotional accusations. He simply waited in utter, terrifying silence until her raised voice faltered against the cold stone walls of the library. When the room fell quiet again, William reached into his inner pocket. Slowly, deliberately, he withdrew a small velvet pouch and placed its contents onto the center of the glass coffee table between them. It was the shattered fragments of the gold and mother-of-pearl royal family order badge, its gold casing bent, its iridescent surface fractured into jagged pieces. The sight of the broken emblem acted as an immediate physical blow. Camilla's breath caught in her throat. The realization hit her that the physical proof of her assault against the sovereign had not been swept away or destroyed by loyal courtiers. It was preserved, catalogued, and transformed into an irrefutable piece of treasonous evidence. "You could have crossed anyone else in this institution," William said, his voice dropping to a low, razor-sharp whisper that cut through the remaining air in the room. "You could have played your political games in the shadows for years. But touching Catherine and desecrating the dignity of the sovereign in front of this nation was your final mistake. I will not negotiate with you. The Crown Council will decide your fate." Camilla opened her mouth to counter, to demand to speak with Charles, to threaten a media war through her long-established press contacts. Before she could utter a single word, William slid a second document across the glass table. It was a formal press embargo notice, accompanied by signed non-disclosure enforcements delivered directly to every major media editor in the United Kingdom. Every public relations firm, every leak channel, and every tabloid outlet she had relied upon for decades had been systematically cut off by Kensington Palace's legal team within the last 6 hours. The realization of total, absolute isolation crashed down upon her. The allies she thought she possessed were gone. The press shield she had built over 30 years had vanished. Her ability to manipulate the narrative had been dismantled in a single, silent masterstroke before she had even entered the room. Her shoulders visibly slumped. The fierce anger that had sustained her for years drained out, leaving behind a hollow, terrified realization of her true position. She was no longer a powerful consort shaping the court behind closed doors. She was a liability, being methodically removed by an institution protecting its own survival. William did not wait for her response. Without another word, he turned, unlocked the heavy oak door, and stepped out into the hallway, leaving Camilla alone in the vast, silent library with the broken fragments of the badge and the crushing weight of her absolute defeat. 5. The moment King Charles III placed his trembling signature on the sovereign decree approved by the Crown Council, the silent, clinical machinery of state authority clicked into motion. There were no public debates, no televised announcements, and no ceremonial farewells. Instead, inside the secure basement offices of the Royal Communications Directorate, Dozens of computer screens illuminated the darkness as IT specialists and digital archivists worked frantically through the night. Methodically, systematically, they executed a total digital purge. Official websites were updated in real time, stripping away paragraphs of biography, deleting galleries of public appearances, and revising her official status. Where her profile once listed her vast public roles and state duties, the text was reduced to a stark, singular line describing her merely as the king's spouse. Simultaneously, a massive legal redistribution of royal authority was initiated across dozens of charitable sectors. Dozens of royal patronages were revoked in a single sweeping administrative act. Royal patronage is a formal legal mechanism that grants ceremonial leadership, prestige, and high-level state endorsement to non-profit organizations and national institutions. Without this legal mechanism, a member of the royal family holds no constitutional mandate to represent or address public bodies. Within hours, emergency letters patent were drawn up under Prince William's direction, reassigning those critical patronages directly to Princess Anne and Princess Catherine. The transition was so seamless that by sunrise, major charities had already received official notices instructing them to redirect all correspondence to the new royal sponsors. Beyond the digital realm and administrative records, the physical infrastructure of her daily power was dismantled with equal speed. Orders issued directly from the Home Office altered her security detail overnight. The motorcade of motorcycle escorts, armored SUVs, and tactical support vehicles that had accompanied her movements for years was completely recalled. Her personal protection team was slashed from 19 dedicated armed officers down to a minimal, rotating security detail tasked solely with basic perimeter surveillance. The visible symbols of high state authority were stripped away, signaling to the entire establishment that her era of public influence had reached an absolute end. Her official calendar, once packed with high-profile state engagements, was completely wiped clean. Major international appearances, diplomatic receptions, and her prominent seat beside King Charles at the upcoming state opening of Parliament were cancelled without hesitation. When news outlets pressed for an explanation regarding her sudden absence from state affairs, palace press officers issued a cold, two-sentence statement attributing the cancellation to a necessary period of rest and private health care. Behind the palace gates, everyone understood the brutal reality hidden beneath that polished diplomatic phrase. It was not a medical hiatus, it was a permanent institutional exile. Before the public even had time to process the brief news release, the physical relocation was carried out under tight security. Camilla was quietly transported away from Clarence House and moved to Hawthorne Lodge, a secluded, heavily guarded estate tucked deep within the Wiltshire countryside. The property, historically reserved for retired household staff and low-profile royal guests, was effectively transformed into a gilded cage. Cut off from her usual network of political insiders, high society allies, and private journalists, her access to the outside world evaporated overnight. To ensure that no leaks could bypass the embargo, a strict communications filter was established around the estate. Every piece of outgoing mail, every personal letter, and every electronic message sent from Hawthorne Lodge was redirected through a dedicated server managed by Prince William's private secretary's office. Any attempt to contact private media editors or issue unauthorized statements was intercepted before it could leave the grounds. The institutional purge was total, silent, and irreversible. In less than 24 hours, the elaborate network of influence, built over 3 decades, was completely dismantled, leaving a once formidable queen isolated in the quiet countryside, stripped of her titles, her platform, and her voice. As the first faint light of dawn crept across the manicured lawns of the Windsor estate, an unmarked sedan pulled up to the secluded royal lodge. There were no cameras, no press officers, and no traditional royal guards present to mark the arrival. The meeting had been arranged on strictly neutral ground, away from the official state chambers of Buckingham Palace and the watchful eyes of Clarence House. Inside the quiet drawing room, the air was cold and motionless. King Charles III sat in a high-backed armchair near the window. The past 48 hours had taken a visible, devastating toll on the aging monarch. His frame appeared noticeably thinner inside his suit jacket, his cheeks hollow and his eyes sunken deep with exhaustion. The fierce authority of the sovereign was gone, replaced by the frail sorrow of a father watching his personal world collapse around him. Standing across from him near the fireplace was Prince William, his posture erect, his demeanor completely composed, embodying the unyielding gravity of the future king. In a voice barely above a whisper, the king began to speak. He did not defend the insults, nor did he dispute the damning evidence presented to the Crown Council. Instead, he begged for leniency for his wife. He pleaded with his son to spare her the public humiliation of total stripped titles, asking for a compromise that would allow her to retain a shred of dignity for the sake of the family and the stability of the monarchy. Every word from the monarch was an earnest plea, appealing to William's sense of filial duty and family mercy. William listened in rigid, respectful silence. He maintained the minimum formal deference due to his father and sovereign, but his expression never softened. He made it unmistakably clear that while he held personal respect for his father, he would not yield a single inch on matters concerning the actual exercise of royal authority. The safety of Princess Catherine, the integrity of the monarchical institution, and the protection of the crown's future were non-negotiable. What followed was a bitter, heartbreaking compromise forged in the quiet shadows of dawn. Under the final terms, Camilla would be allowed to retain her formal title purely as a matter of paper record, preventing a catastrophic constitutional scandal in the public eye. However, she was required to vanish entirely from every aspect of national life. She would attend no state banquets, participate in no public ceremonies, and hold zero presence within the political or administrative functions of the realm. To secure this single concession and shield his wife from public trial, King Charles was forced to pay the ultimate political price. Reaching into his leather folder, the king produced an official instrument of delegation. Under this legal framework, the sovereign formally transferred the management of all day-to-day royal affairs, state paperwork, and household decisions directly to the Prince of Wales. While Charles would remain the regnant monarch in name, the operational governance of the kingdom was effectively placed into William's hands. With a trembling hand, the king picked up his fountain pen. As the nib touched the parchment, a single, rare tear fell from the old king's eye, blotting the crisp paper near his signature. It was an agonizing moment of surrender, marking the exact second where real power officially shifted across generations without a single public abdication. William waited until the ink dried before carefully retrieving the document and placing it securely inside his coat. The transaction was complete. The crown had survived another crisis, but the human cost was laid bare in the quiet room, where a defeated king sat alone in the growing morning light, mourning the power he had lost and the bitter sacrifice he had been forced to make. The quiet countryside of Wiltshire remains silent today, serving as the permanent backdrop for a woman who once stood at the very pinnacle of British society. Trapped within the gilded isolation of Hawthorne Lodge, Camilla exists as a ghost of the royal court, completely severed from the machinery of state and stripped of every public platform she fought decades to secure. At the same time, inside the grand halls of Buckingham Palace, an aging King Charles III moves through his remaining duties in heavy, dignified solitude. Having surrendered the daily governance of the realm to secure his wife's protection, the sovereign now occupies a throne defined by quiet retreat, yielding the true center of national authority to Prince William and Princess Catherine. This sudden collapse of a reign before it could even fully take root stands as a chilling testament to the unforgiving nature of sovereign power. Within the walls of an ancient monarchy, personal ambition and emotional outbursts are secondary to the survival of the crown itself. When Camilla crossed that invisible line, attacking Princess Catherine and desecrating the sacred insignia of the king, she miscalculated the tolerance of an institution built on centuries of discipline. In the realm of high politics, mistakes that breach constitutional boundaries are not met with quiet forgiveness. They are met with absolute, clinical erasure. Watching the solitary figure of King Charles walking alone through the palace gardens, observers across the globe cannot help but feel a profound sense of poetic justice. The haunting image of an isolated ruler, abandoned by the grand promises of his past choices, echoes the deep pain and loneliness that Princess Diana endured within those very same palace walls decades ago. The long wheel of fate has spun full circle, shattering reckless ambitions and proving that no individual, regardless of their title, can permanently evade the consequences of their actions. As the realm steps into this new era, a profound question hangs over the future of the British monarchy. Will the uncompromising, razor-sharp resolve demonstrated by Prince William serve as the necessary foundation to secure the crown for the modern age, or does this brutal purge mark the beginning of a cold, calculated reign where loyalty is demanded and mistakes are never forgiven? What are your thoughts on this historic shift of power? Did Prince William take the necessary steps to protect his family and the future of the monarchy, or was the outcome far too harsh for a father and his king? Share your perspective in the comments below. If you found this deep analysis compelling, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon so you never miss our next detailed investigation into the hidden politics of the royal court.